Oh, good morning. Another day. Another day. The title that I've chosen is Massive Lies Still Believed by Most, for now. And I wrote, Truly we live in a time of awakening, yet most still sleep. How deep does the deception go? Very deep. The roots of most systemic structures in human society spring from lies that are so common and accepted that many still think they are true. As I've said many, many times, the really big lie is separation. It's so prevalent that many simply cannot believe unity and oneness are the essence of all life. These diehards dig in their heels, defending the old paradigm. Theirs is a losing battle. I've got a couple of thoughts of directions to go this morning, and I'll probably include them both. The first one is 9/11, and the second one was going to be about hell and religious beliefs. 9/11 to me was the beginning of the wake-up call. I didn't initially on 9/11 believe it was an inside job. I saw the second plane hit the tower when I was in the restaurant getting breakfast for the crew that I was working with that day. And the first words out of my mouth was bomb Baghdad off the face of the earth. That's how ignorant I was at the time. And I don't know what made me think Baghdad did it. I don't know what I was listening to that might have triggered that, because of the first, they were already talking about the first plane hitting the tower, and I'm standing there waiting for the breakfast order to be done so I can take it back, and then the second plane hits while I'm sitting there watching it. So I don't know what they were saying, but they were probably talking about Iraq, and that's what triggered it, and it's how easily influenced I was by the television to believe a lie. But it wasn't long after that I realized that it just didn't add up. And I began doing the research, and I began talking about 9/11. I joined the 9/11 Truth Movement and learned a heck of a lot. And yet so many of my friends still believed the 9/11 mainstream story, which doesn't ever add up to any amount of truth for anybody that takes the time to investigate. When the thing happened with the New Way back on September 11th, when Sue in her message talked about the 19 hijackers and just gave bits and pieces of the official story, which I know for a fact she herself did not believe, because I've heard her say that she knew on 9/11, which I didn't, that it had to be an inside job. She knew that. And yet many people still cling to the old paradigm idea, or the, quote, acceptable and accepted truth of our culture, 9/11 being one of them. One of my friends at the New Way, a retired military master sergeant, was infuriated at me for having the gall when Sue asked the question, does anybody know why the 19 hijackers would do such a thing? And I raised my hand and I said, they didn't do it, Sue. And she said, well, we're not going to go there. And this beautiful person, this wonderful friend of mine, told me to my face, I wanted so bad to prove you wrong. I wanted so bad to prove that you were nuts. She didn't say that, but she did say, I wanted to prove you wrong. And I spent several days, 4 or 5 hours a day, researching it. I came to the conclusion, oh my God, he's right. He's right. Anybody that takes the time to investigate will come to that same conclusion. But it's so hard to let go of the idea that our leaders actually do what's right for us and are actually mostly honest and mostly relatively decent. It's hard to imagine, especially someone that's retired military, that they've spent 20 years in the military service fighting and killing for their country, and their country is lying to them. Their leaders are not telling the truth. It's a really hard bullet to bite. It's a really hard fact to get your mind around, because we don't want to believe that we've been so deceived. We just don't want to believe it. And yet it's true. The deceptions go so deep in our culture. Virtually everything that we're required to do, we're only required because we don't know who we are. If we knew who we were, the authorities would collapse, because they get their power from us. They always have, always will. And it's through our ignorance that we give consent to their lies, like getting a driver's license and registering your car, which you don't have to do. Travel is free. You have a natural right to travel, and nobody can make you pay to do something that is lawful and require a license to do something which is already lawful. Yet, most people in America and around the world, I assume, do that very thing, at least in the so-called developed world, where we are most vulnerable to the lie. The second thing I want to actually talk about today is the religious aspect. I've been talking about that the last while, as you know, those of you that listened, and it's pushing a lot of people's buttons. One lady says, how can anybody be so crazy to believe in unity? There's no unity. There's separation. And this is a spiritual person, or claims to be. And then another one saying, Ron, I want to say this gently, but you're a liar. And then goes on to defend the Christian point of view. I want to talk to you about Carlton Pearson. And I'm going to read actually what I have on my website in the links page. Carlton Pearson was a protege of Oral Roberts, and even considered Oral's black son. He pastored one of the largest evangelical churches in the USA, 5,000 to 6,000 people a week. Then a strange thing happened as he saw the situation in Rwanda. As he watched his TV, he saw these African people, mostly women and children, walking slowly back, trying to come home. There was no light or life in their eyes. It was a horrible thing for me to see. Swollen bellies and skeletal bodies, emaciated. And then the babies looking at the mom, and the mama looking out in space. It was sad. And I'm sitting there with my little fat-cheeked baby and my plate full of food, watching a big screen TV, a man of God, a preacher of the gospel, an evangelist. And I'm looking at those people, assuming that they're probably Muslim and going to hell. Because God wouldn't do that to Christians, I'm thinking. And then, right at that moment, Carlton had his revelation. He said, God, I don't know how you're going to call yourself a loving God and allow those people to suffer so much and then just suck them into hell. And I believe, he said, it was the Spirit of God in me saying, is that what you think we're doing? And I said, that's what I've been taught. God, I can't save the whole world. And that's when I heard the voice say, precisely. That's what we did. And if you'd tell them that they are redeemed, you wouldn't create those kind of problems. Can't you see they're already in hell? Clear as a bell, says Carlton. He heard God telling him to preach this new message that hell is a place in life and that after death, everybody is redeemed. Everybody. Thus began his gospel of inclusion, which cost him his church. I read his story, which I have a link to on the links page that you can go and read more of. more of what happened with Carlton Pearson, as he was featured on Charisma magazine, and the cover of Charisma magazine, this boy wonder preacher, this Oral Roberts protege, all of a sudden preaching that people aren't going to go to hell if they don't believe the Christian message as he had been taught it, and started preaching, as he says, the gospel of inclusion. It's the same one that I preach. Imagine that. And he became devastated as he was kicked out of his own church that he had built. Again, 5,000 to 6,000 people a week attending. And he lost it. He lost it all. Oh, in the end, it's continuing today. But he had to go to a unity church where a gay minister restored him to the ministry and restored fellowship. He had to learn unity. And then he went back, and I don't know, he has a church now. I don't know how large it is. I haven't studied up on it recently. It's been on my website for several years now. But anyway, he was restored by believing in unity. Because unity is the truth. It's not the obvious truth because we live in separate bodies. But it's the truth nevertheless. It's the scientific truth. It's the mystical truth. It's the spiritual reality of life itself. And yet many still want to believe in separation because separation gives them control and it lets them think they were right. Carlton Pearson, like my friend who was the retired military, began to investigate. And they realized, as Carlton did in his message, "Get the hell out of my Bible," which I posted on Facebook yesterday, which also brought a lot of commentary. He realized that what he had been taught was wrong. And these massive lies are still believed by most people in our society for now. What is it going to take to wake everybody up, for the truth to become widely accepted and known? And then people will wonder, well, how could we have ever believed the earth was flat? How could we have ever believed that a loving God would send anybody to hell forever and ever because they didn't get it right? How could we have ever believed that buildings can come down because airplanes hit them? That airplane fire can melt structural steel? When a building in Spain burned for 3 days and still stayed erect, that fire doesn't melt steel unless it gets very, very, very hot, like in thermite. Lots of lies. Our whole culture is riddled with lies, and it touches every aspect of it. Anybody that thinks that their religion is exempt, or their political party is exempt, or their corporation structure is exempt, wake up. There are no exemptions. The whole thing has been built on a foundation of lies, of untruths, of things that will not make sense once you begin to see from the perspective of the soul, from the perspective of eternity, from God's perspective. Then you will understand that God's love is infinite and His grace is radical. And it touches everybody. It has nothing to do with religion. It never did. Never did. That's a construct of our own imagination, of our own minds, trying to make sense of a world that doesn't make sense. Because separation is the apparent truth, and yet it's the essential lie. The essential lie on which all other untruths are built. They all have their roots in that one deception. We are one is the truth. Always have been, always will be, and our very eyes and our very minds deceive us because we don't see deeply enough with the eyes of the heart. I invite you to consider letting go of everything you think is true, and becoming like a little child and asking the Spirit of God to simply teach you. Say God or higher self or universe or however you want to address the divine. Help me open my eyes. I'm willing to see. Can you say that? I'm willing to see. Watch what happens as the truth begins to unfold more and more in our culture, and the lies that we've believed to be true are exposed for the absolute fraud that they've always been, and we didn't know. Forgive yourself as I forgive myself, because we've all believed the lie. It's time to awaken to the unconditional love that God has always given each of us. Thank you for listening. Namaste.